Cobra Kai Season 5 was recently released, and assuming you've binged your way through all of the episodes, you're probably wondering about a few things. Obviously, the show had a lot of karate battles duked out on the big screen, and while the winner wasn't decided on the mats, there were a few other things that went down. What can you say about it? Terry Silver just doesn't fight fair. Still, let's get into some of the best behind-the-scenes moments from the season. Ready? Let's dive in. Did you know Sam fights herself in Season 5? Well, that's kind of what happened for sure, but this was definitely a key moment in the season, and easily one of the best moments when it comes to the behind-the-scenes action. Okay, so as you may know, the actors of Cobra Kai do work with a stunt double, and sometimes those stunt doubles are asked to fight. Though the vast majority of the time they perform their own stunts, there are some times when the actors just don't want to, and the stunt doubles have to step in. In this case, Sam's stunt double basically had to fight because, well, she was fighting herself. Okay, so it wasn't actually Sam fighting, but the scene did have Sam facing off against herself in a sense. Sam's stunt double had to train very closely with the actor in order to really pin down the movements, actions, and sequences of fighting for both versions of Sam. Ultimately, the actors loved this moment, and it was a pretty unique action sequence. Think about it, it's not very often that actors are fortunate enough to be able to see themselves fighting against their own stunt doubles, as usually, stunt doubles are only on screen when the actors aren't. This is a pretty cool behind-the-scenes moment, and one that the actors seem to be grateful for. Usually, stunt doubles aren't given the opportunity to train this closely with their actors, but here it's just part of the job. Next, let's talk about Una O'Brien playing Devon and ripping the book. Okay, so this was a pretty heated scene, and it actually took quite a few different takes to get it right. The scene had to be just right, and every aspect had to be perfect. Otherwise, the actors and director weren't happy with it. Essentially, the prop team ended up scrambling for more copies of the death penalty for her to rip. In fact, Una O'Brien mentioned that the prop team actually pleaded with her to not keep ripping the book, but she just wasn't having it. She mentioned that she felt like this really established her character and felt like it was a key scene in the show. Plus, she just couldn't help herself. The scenes were so good that they needed to be ripped out of the book, and Una O'Brien seemed more than happy to do just that. As we know, there's no actual count on how many books she ripped up by the end of filming, but it had to be quite a few. It's actually pretty impressive that she was able to rip the book so fast and with such precision, but we guess you could say that it's just a talent. Okay, let's talk about the sword fight with Terry Silver and the dangers it posed. This part of the show actually had a very real element of danger, and I mean that quite literally. Terry Silver versus the gang was a pretty intense scene, and the actors had to put their lives on the line in order to film this scene. In fact, the actor for Terry Silver went up to the creators for this scene and casually mentioned that they could do this scene because nobody really knew what to do for the next big fight scene. The last thing he expected, though, was for them to actually okay the project. He expected them to be like, no, that's too dangerous. In case you didn't know, it's actually really dangerous to even approach a sword, let alone swing one around. Filming with swords is known to be one of the most dangerous movie scenes and is actually a pretty risky proposition. In fact, the actor literally mentioned that this was life and death, and that the scene itself took place in an insane environment. Next to the dark pool, the freezing cold air, it has everything to do with making the scene look realistic. And of course, there's the fact that Terry Silver is a total lunatic and knows how to fight, so you know he's going to do everything in his power to fight dirty. Overall, this scene was pretty intense and pretty dangerous, which is something that's not often expressed in television shows. They just don't go this far. They only pretend to, but they don't actually risk their lives in the process of filming. Let's dive into what it took to learn the choreography in the show. With Cobra Kai, it's all about being realistic and having the characters actually look like they know what they're doing. That's why the actors and stunt doubles in the show spent an insane amount of time learning the choreography for the karate scenes. In fact, these actors couldn't ever switch places. It was so important to know the specific choreography of each part that there was never a time when an actor didn't know their choreography. They had to be able to learn it fast and do it well, otherwise they might mess up the scene or look completely ridiculous. Imagine if the characters just looked like idiots. That wouldn't exactly be a great look for the show now, would it? It's a pretty intense commitment, but ultimately it paid off. In the end, the actors for Cobra Kai all ended up getting paid to learn karate. Pretty awesome, right? Okay, let's talk about the fight between Danny and Terry Silver. Essentially, this fight almost didn't make it into the show at all. There was a lot of energy put into this fight scene, and Daniel LaRusso had to be pretty much a total badass in order to get it right. For this reason, the showrunners were actually worried that Ralph Macchio, who plays Daniel, Daniel was going to injure himself on set. This was quite possibly one of the biggest fight scenes, but after a few takes, it just seemed like he was taking too much on.
Well, I could lie and say I was in the neighborhood. Is your mom home? Hey, listen.
At that moment, Ralph said that this is exactly what he signed up for, and mentioned that he wanted to do one more fight. And that fight worked. It ended up in the final cut and was one of the best scenes in the show. Of course, this came at a price. There's no doubt it took a pretty heavy toll on Machio, but it was worth it in the end. We're not done with Daniel yet, because we're going to talk about Daniel against Chosen. This guy just can't catch a break, and the fight scene here was incredibly difficult to choreograph. In fact, the guy who plays Chosen was a pretty big actor, so the work put into this was incredible to pull off the fight, and so much more. Essentially, the show writers had to make sure the fight scene took place in reference to their previous history, and the fact that Chosen and Daniel were definitely not on the best of terms. Ultimately though, they ended up smashing it, and the fight scene looked incredible. Finally, let's go ahead and talk about the legacy characters and how they showed up in the show. Ultimately, people were the most concerned about Mike Barnes and how he showed up in the show. The showrunners had mentioned that they always put the utmost importance on achieving a perfect match between nostalgia, classic characters, and the new characters who the show focuses on. This is something they achieved perfectly when they brought in Mike, and you can definitely see the resemblance between Mike and his younger version. Obviously played by the same actor, the development of his personality and his arc was something that the writers absolutely nailed. Essentially, they needed to make sure Mike's personality fit with his childhood version, but also made sense when he came back as a grown man. They needed to make sure they brought in a character who wasn't just a shadow image and a memory, but instead a perfect fit to the show. Okay, so what's the takeaway? Cobra Kai Season 5 had without question some of the most intense and dangerous fight scenes, with the actors being put at risk. Sometimes even risking their lives. It's clear that they were dedicated to making this show a legendary martial arts movie franchise. There's no question that this show had everything the fans wanted, and there are so many memorable moments and incredible behind-the-scenes displays of talent. Ultimately, fans loved Season 5, with some even saying it was the best season of Cobra Kai yet. We can't wait to see what happens next, but for now, we'll just have to wait and see where Cobra Kai goes from here, and what happens in new seasons as they release. What else? Okay, that's it for this video. Go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, and let us know what your favorite behind-the-scenes moment was from the show so far. Was it Sam fighting herself? Was it the insanely dangerous sword scene? Let us know in the comments. We're excited to see your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.